Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. We do have a number of guests with us today because we have two really great um, guest speakers who are going to talk to us today about the newly formed Summit County Housing Trust Fund. So with us today, we have Summit County Councilman Jeff Wilhite. He represents the 4th District, which is kind of in the middle of the county there, spread out. And then we also have Rachel Bradenstein, who's the Executive Director of the Western Reserve Community Fund. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Councilman Wilhite, who will kick things off, and then Rachel has a really great presentation to accompany his remarks.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you all for the opportunity to spend some time with you this morning and share with you about the Summit County Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We're very excited about the direction that it's moving. Background on how it came to be important, but before I get started, I also want to thank you for being such an active organization in the community. You guys are very much on the front lines of what's happening in the real estate market, and you have a great outreach program. And from someone who has a community role myself, it's very much appreciated that you guys do all the things that you do. So thank you very much for that. I wanted to begin by sharing with you how this trust fund came to be. My day job, if you will, is I direct a program called Family Promise of Summit County. We're a nonprofit program that gets homeless families with children back into sustainable housing. And going through that activity on a daily basis for the last several years, we've realized the severe lack of affordable housing for those who are on the lower earning spectrum and have some challenges in getting into housing. And we got together a group of folks who were in the housing arena. We had folks that really have a compassion or have a passion for this topic, and we actually formed the committee and developed this around my kitchen table, which I'm very proud of, because we wanted to be focused on this when we sat down and started looking at what we could do here in Summit County to create a housing trust fund, away from all the noise of the office and that kind of a thing. The committee really took it to heart, and we're very proud of the fact that we have now completed the design and the format for the fund. We have dollars in the fund as we speak. We have partners coming online to help us move forward. But one of the things that we always heard about was from developers who may be putting together some type of an affordable housing trust package or a mix of what they're doing development-wise. And oftentimes there's a gap in the funding. And rather than lose the opportunity to gain those housing units, we wanted to be able to do several things. One, to assist those organizations that are involved in affordable housing to have a resource that could help them either fill a gap or be a significant partner to attract other partners to get projects done going forward. And Rachel will cover that in detail with her presentation. But I'm very happy to share with you that the fund was approved by County Council. It's been set up as a separate 501c3 under the Western Reserve Fund. And there's a couple of reasons why we did that. Looking at best practices of those funds across the country that have been successful and those that ultimately were not, being a public program, and I'm not diminishing any of my colleagues, but oftentimes when you set up a program and it's elected officials that are involved, sometimes things don't get done the way they should be. And we wanted it to not be this political tug of war with the funds that were raised. We wanted to have folks who understood the industry, who worked in the industry daily, and can make sound decisions for programs that would benefit us going forward. We also wanted to avoid creating yet another organization. We wanted to find a home for the fund that made sense. By making sense, I mean being located into an organization that has experience in funding projects for development. And as you'll see, that very much became the Western Reserve Fund, which is part of the the Finance Development Authority in the county. It's a small board, so it can be agile. We have the program is focused towards for-profit and nonprofit entities working in the area of housing development. The county itself put $1 million into the fund to get it started. 500,000 was a cash infusion. 500 is a matching grant, if you will. So as we attract other folks coming in, the county will match that up to $500,000. We have some other folks that have since expressed great interest. The banking community is a heavy emphasis on our part right now because, as you know, they have CRA requirements, Community Reinvestment Act requirements that as a lending institution, they have to be engaged in on a regular basis. So those conversations are very positive and going forward in a really good way. What we hope to accomplish is grow the fund as large as we can. We'll never stop trying to grow the fund and be able to have a significant impact then on those projects that will create the housing stock that we are lacking here in the county. As I mentioned, we did it was about a year's review. We did best practice search from around the country. Right here in Ohio, the Franklin County Affordable Housing Trust Fund has some amazing projects that they've been able to put together. They have been in existence over 20 years, and they're over $80 million in size. And they've done everything from just a straight affordable housing development to creating housing for single parents who are students seeking professional degrees in all different areas, and just a really strong portfolio of projects that they've put together. So we're very excited to share this with you this morning. Again, feel free to ask any questions as we go forward. And at this point, I'm going to ask Rachel to do her presentation so you can see some of the meat of the program, and then we'll be available for questions after that. But again, thank you all for the opportunity to share this program with you. Rachel?
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Bear with me as I pull up my screen here. Right here. All right, sorry for the pause there, but as Jeff said, we're really pleased to be here. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund that we set up for Summit County. But if you'll indulge me for a little bit, I will give you a little bit of history on our organization. And I think it's important to hear how things progress for us organizationally and how this can work. This trust fund under the mothership, as I like to call it, and how we can be a really great public-private partnership. And you know, Jeff was talking about how we wanted to set this up in a place that was more nimble, and we have a track record of that. So I'm Rachel Bridenstine. I'm Executive Director of Western Reserve Community Fund, which is a nonprofit organization that's under the umbrella per se of Development Finance Authority of Summit County. And DFA is a Port Authority entity, and we've been around since 1999, really focused on economic development finance. We have different tools through that entity, and one that we're probably the most proud of is our A- bond rating from S&P, where we've been able to finance quite a significant amount of projects throughout Summit County and Ohio. We've gone up through from Cleveland down to Dayton area, depending on other port authorities that want to work with us, and we can be collaborative that way. So for since 1999 to last year, we've financed a total of 107 projects across 11 counties and 1.4 billion financed through that. So this entity is a strong backing here of and the board and the relationships that it's built throughout the time. However, as we work together as a staff and a community, it was seen about 2010 that there was some gaps in the tools that we're bringing specifically for low-income communities. And so we went forward with an idea of becoming a community development entity, which is a certification through U.S. Treasury in order to work with new market tax credits. So we got that certification in 2011 and have received awards through Treasury for this allocation. I'm not going to go through all the detail of the program, but it's the detail there is that it's enabling investment in low-income communities that wouldn't happen otherwise but for a tax credit. So if you're familiar with low-income housing tax credits, it's similar. It's just more for real estate commercial projects. It can also be manufacturing as well. All about job creation, services to the community, that sort of thing. So with that entity, Development Fund of the Western Reserve, we have worked with about 110 million since 2012 in projects throughout Northeast Ohio. When we were working through this tax credit, we continued to work through these tax credit deals. One thing that was glaringly obvious is that everything we've done with DFA and the tax credit entity have been of a certain scale. We really couldn't work below, really a $5 million project, which there leaves a gap in our community of what is needed for financing options and tools for our community. And so in 2019, we took a leap and created yet another nonprofit entity. And this one is Western Reserve Community Fund, and it is we are a certified community development financial institution. It's another certification through U.S. Treasury, and since 2019 we've been wholeheartedly focused on access to capital for smaller projects in our region here. You see on the map or Summit County focus, but we also have the ability to work in adjacent counties. So with that, we've been working with nonprofits, small businesses, and we have various tools available. But first, I will briefly go into what is a CDFI, because this is a designation that it opens quite a few doors for our region. And we are the only locally based Akron CDFI. There are CDFIs in Cleveland area, there's national service area CDFIs, multi-state, but there's something to be said about having a local entity that knows the region, the community, and the needs. So the CDFIs are really, we're dedicated to access to capital, affordable lending, better changing some of those systems, especially for low-income communities and disadvantaged businesses. So we do that through more flexible lending patterns as well as development services. So we will walk hand in hand with a borrower to get them to a place where they are able to get a loan. We'll work through with a nonprofit how to put together a project pro forma for their next project, that sort of thing. So CDFIs, we're not a bank. We don't compete with banks, but we do lend in similar. We're a financial institution. So our mission is we're supporting community development in Summit County, and specifically, we want to provide access to capital. We want equity, more equitable situations for financing, and the CDFIs can fill that gap. And speaking of gaps, we're filling gaps for projects. Jeff was talking about housing, affordable housing projects, and there's gaps there in financing. We can't just rely on LIHTC for our affordable housing and other needs. There has to be some other sources. And so that's CDFIs, a lot of times that's what we do. We are that gap filler of financing. So I'll briefly touch on the programs before I get into the more interesting part with the Housing Trust Fund, but we do have other lending programs. We have our general lending arm where we can make loans from $50,000 to $500,000 for different types of projects. It doesn't have to be real estate. It can also be small business. We're working with a manufacturing facility right now that they want to expand to another line, and we're doing working capital for that. That's an example. But we've also done a loan to a CDC with a launch kitchen. So we worked on the build out for that. Then we also have our minority contractor capital access program. We partnered with the county and the city and the Akron Urban League to create this. And what it does is we work with minority contractors in construction, and we offer them lines of credit that they can access for project specific costs, as well as technical assistance, mentorship programs, pipeline, working with them to take the next step if they want to go from residential to commercial. What are some other options, lead abatement programs, certifications, all of that. So that program, we've been working it, that was created in 2020 as well. And then we have our Akron Resiliency Fund, which is focused specifically in Akron, partnership with the city, purely small business loans for payroll, working capital, refinancing of high interest debt, purchase equipment, really favorable terms to both help businesses get through the pandemic period and then grow beyond that, take some risks. And so those are loans between $10,000 and $70,000. All right, so now I'm going to go into maybe I'll stop there. If there's any questions on DFA, WRCF, I know there was a lot of information there before I go into the Housing Trust Fund.
Great presentation so far. Thank you. Akil, I saw you had a question in the chat if you wanted to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask that.
Okay. Sorry about that. I was getting my computer unmuted. So my question specifically is centered around minority developers. And have you had any success in lending in those spaces? And do you have any metrics around that, that you can share?
That is a great question. And that is something that I can't give you metrics right now of that. It's something we are aware of and working towards what can we do as a financing entity to promote and encourage more minority development. I think this Affordable Housing Trust Fund, there are some more organizations that are minority led that we want to be supporting that way too. I think there's some pathways to get more traction on that end, but unfortunately, I mean, completely honest, we have not seen a lot of minority developer activity and just a reminder that it has been on the larger scale projects that we've worked with, specifically up through 2019 or so.
Okay. I would love to have some offline conversations with you because there's a
Yes.
lot of, conversations going on and I'm kind of a part of a little bit of that. But yeah, if we could
Yes, please. I
maybe
would
set
love
up a
that.
meeting, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, so I will continue now into our housing trust fund. And Jeff already talked a bit about the introduction of what its purpose is. And just a reminder, we created this in order to assist the creation, development, rehab, programming, all encompassing aspects of affordable housing in Summit County. And this again is all for the support of low-income housing households. How we deem affordable housing, and this is in line with a lot of the HUD guidelines, is that it's housing for low-income households, or the costs and utilities are up to no more than 30% of their gross income. And then low-income households are deemed, for our purposes of the fund, of any household with an income under, at or below 80% of the area median income for Akron and surrounding area. So the purpose of this fund is to really support what we have in our community for these types of projects and programs. We have a great wealth, in my opinion, of nonprofits, organizations that are doing great things both on the construction and rehab side for affordable housing, as well as programmatic. And what we've heard over and over again is the need for more funding sources to fill the gaps so that they can do more projects, they can be more active and successful without relying on more the cumbersome statewide subsidies, LIHTC I had mentioned, and not to say that they're to knock any of those programs. They're wonderful, they're needed, but we can add on to that. We're additive through this fund. And we want to prioritize the affordable housing, increase the supply that we have in our community. But then there's also issues that we can work with through this fund of addressing rehab of our housing stock in general. In Summit County and Akron, you see there's so much needed, and this can be a good way for nonprofit developers to work through single family homes, rehab some houses, have some working with us to make those numbers work. Value issues are, I'm not going to go down that whole rabbit trail, but I think you're all aware of how the value issues of a lot of the houses in our areas, Akron specifically, is it's a hard nut to crack, but something like affordable housing, good quality rental properties, that sort of thing can move the needle on that issue. And of course, we also want to promote home ownership opportunities. There's a big part of that too, we want to have good rental, but also encourage other people to be able to own their own home. And so working with home ownership education programs and others, emergency housing, things, it all connects. And if we can be a part of it in a way that makes sense through grants, loans, and forgivable loans, or the way we've structured this fund, which I will go into the next section. So what we've been focusing right now, and Jeff has talked about capitalization of this fund, and we're so thankful for the county's step to make this, a reality, that we can start working in this space. But we are working through with other banks capitalization of about a $7 million fund so that we can make loans specifically that are much more flexible than you'd find in traditional lending. So an example of a loan structure would be having an interest rate at about 3.5% with a 10-year term, probably about 30-year AM along with that. And they can be used for construction of new housing, for sale or rental, preservation, as I was speaking of before, of our housing stock that we already have, conversion of or adaptive reuse of some spaces for affordable housing. We've seen a lot of great examples from other funds where that can be a great opportunity that not everyone wants to take, but this fund could. And then rehab conversion from marketplace to affordable housing. It can be mixed as well. As long as the project has 30% affordability, we can work through financing that project as well. It would be focused on the affordable side of things, but we're not precluding that mix of market and affordable, market rate and affordable. And then our loan amounts, so what we're looking at right now would be a senior not to exceed 500,000, and subordinate, we would be willing to come in under a bank not to exceed 250,000 currently. And that's based on the structure of the fund and that anticipation of this 7 million to be working with. However, in the meantime, we are starting a grant round because we do know the true need for setting up immediately. We can't just wait for other funds to come along. And so we're working with a bit of what the county has granted to start a grant round for pre-development and programmatic grants. One of the large gaps we've seen for many projects is access to funding sources for pre-development costs. And you can't do a loan for that. It just doesn't work. So this subsidy, the grant towards mainly pre-development costs, it can be for other gap fillers as well, but that's been more of our focus there, is that what can we help to get a project moving forward now with those pre-development aspects. And then the plan would be later that we'd be able to, in the summer months, fall, looking towards financing that project because they were able to move forward with the grant funding. And so we also have programmatic grants up to 5,000, and that's for home education, home buying education programs, any other type of that pure programmatic aspect connected to housing. And so there's so much that we can talk more about housing, but we are very excited to be moving forward on this. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to add this program to our community, and that our CDFI can contribute in that way. I'm thankful for Jeff and his leadership here, and I will stop there for questions. We can continue the dialogue.
It's John Lynch. I've got a couple questions. The pre-development of $50,000, is that for a full development? And also, I'm assuming that there probably would be like tax abatement available, but is that something that you're involved with, or is that going to the city and the city itself?
Yeah, okay. So the question of up to 50,000 would be a grant for some costs. I mean, it's not the expectation that would cover all of the pre-development, depending on the type of project. It could be very significant for a smaller one. For larger, it could cover some of the costs. But does that answer your question with the pre-development grants?
It probably covers part of it, but
okay. And then the tax abatement side of things that you were asking. So part of our work is with these organizations, making sure that they access the right other departments, such as the city, for tax abatement programs. We're not offering it through ourselves, but we are aware of that and can work with them to get as much as they possibly can in the structure of these projects and development.
And you'd also work, I'm assuming, with like second mortgages, things like that, that could be available.
What was that again?
You would also assist in working with these organizations as far as providing second mortgages or whatever else, other opportunities that they would have.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple questions. I'm not sure, Rachel, if these will be for you or they might be more for Councilman Wilhite. So I know you referenced home ownership, and certainly that's something that's very important to us. We did a housing affordability study for the city of Akron last year, and it showed that renters are very housing cost burdened. So by that, what we see is that saving for a down payment, which is under normal circumstances difficult. It's even more difficult for the many renters that are in Akron. Through the Housing Trust Fund, has the county council or the trust fund itself talked about a path to homeownership? How might you see that working together?
I can say from the county's perspective, there hasn't been any discussion on that directly. It's been sort of ancillary as we pulled this trust fund together. You guys are spot on. The folks that we deal with on a regular basis, they're worried about 5 o'clock at the end of the day. Will there be a roof over their head and can they feed their family? Saving for a down payment on a house is a very difficult thing to do. So we've been looking at programs, trying to do sort of a best practice search to see if there's anything out there that is currently stood up and is having any success. But that's definitely on the radar to see if we can address that going forward. Some of the conversations were maybe working with them or a similar program to Habitat for Humanity, where maybe there's some kind of a program that we could create that would get folks into a home ownership position, because we all know that's the ultimate for families pulling themselves out of poverty is to own your own home. And it is at the top of the list, I can assure you of that.
And I would add on there that many of the organizations that we are looking to be supporting through, looking at East Akron Neighborhood Development Corporation as a, for instance, they have home ownership classes. They're all about that path to home ownership. So we want to work and support those organizations. And I would say many, if not all, of the nonprofits that we've been in contact with and are building relationships with, it's very much a forefront of their minds, as well as the rental aspect of if they can create better rental experiences, you can get maybe a little bit quicker to the homeowner aspect. And then you're completely right on the cost burden that so many are dealing with rentals and really substandard rental properties that they're dealing with as well. And that's just not acceptable. So we should be both creating affordable quality rental properties with encouragement of the home ownership aspect. And I have confidence that the nonprofits that we are working with, that's their focus as well. It's not an either or, it's a both and.
So kind of as a follow-up to that, we hear a lot about the missing middle and workforce housing in particular. Councilman, have you been hearing from some of our employers, whether big or small or somewhere in the middle there, that they're having trouble finding local workers, or that their workers are having trouble finding housing?
Absolutely, no question about it. And that's for those organizations that are looking to bridge that gap. It's very smart on their part to look at workforce housing, especially given what we've gone through this past year. With COVID, there are so many, we're learning, so many organizations that they're not sending their folks back home. Or back to the office anytime soon. So what does that create opportunity-wise, for the workforce development side of the equation? But because there's such a tight labor pool right now of specific professional qualifications, you've got to have every possible thing you can. It's not just salary; it's quality of life for those employees. If they're going to, especially if they're going to relocate here, what does that package look like for them? How are our schools? What are our opportunities for recreation? What are our opportunities for personal growth, whether that be further education, whatever fits into that arena? And workforce development housing is very much something that we're all looking at and trying to come up with ways that we can make that work for employers. That's where your organization could be very helpful, in that process, because you all have the expertise in providing folks housing. What could that look like, overall?
Great, thank you for that. You mentioned COVID and that triggered another question. So if somebody else has a question, please use the drop box or the chat box. So we're getting a big influx of a new round of COVID dollars coming in. Will the county be able to divert any of that into the Housing Trust Fund? I'm not sure if Treasury's released what all the rules and regulations will be with those.
No, we can't use that money for a fund like this.
Okay.
Excuse me, because you're right. There will be a set guideline of how those funds can be spent. I believe we're due to get 103 million this time around. We got 94 million last time, but we put it into many programs that help folks get through the COVID process. The concern with these dollars is that we don't put them into something that is, and it sounds silly, but the only term I can use is sustainable. Because let's say we invest in program A, and folks' livelihoods dependent upon it. You've got dollars committed to something that there won't be, God willing, there won't be a third round of CARES dollars. So how do you sustain that thing that you set up when it was set up on dollars that are sort of a windfall, for lack of a better term? So we're very cautious about how those dollars are spent. Unless they have it in the guideline, those dollars can't go into this fund. Now, what that did for the county was it freed up dollars that allowed us to put the $1 million in the first round. And if that could be the case again, that would be great, but that remains to be seen.
Thank you. Sometimes we'll hear from our friends in the commercial real estate side of things that fees for different building permits and all these other things that kind of impact the overall cost of projects can really drive up costs and make it difficult to do affordable housing. How is the county taking a look at their own internal building fee structure and how that might complement the Housing Trust Fund for developers?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you yet on that question. It's an important question. There's been some talk about how do we address that, but I don't have a specific answer right at this point.
Okay. And then I guess the last question, and you touched on this a little bit, is just how can ACAR partner with the Housing Trust Fund?
Well, I think and Rachel, you jump in on this because this is what you do every day. But I would think one thing that would be helpful is, as we're talking to the lending institutions that are out there, the banks in particular that have the CRA requirement, if you could let them know your support of something like this, an organization like your association, you cover a good part of northeastern Ohio, and I think because those folks are a part of your daily activities with your customers and just the real estate industry, to let them know how important that is to all of you, that would be a big help. And then if you have any other thoughts on how funds can be raised, certainly get those to Rachel, and we can look at those. But you're just showing your support because of your organization would be a huge help, for us going forward. Rachel, do you have any other thoughts on that?
I mean, that was great, Jeff. But in addition, just increasing the network of people knowing about something like this, that we can share that information with others too, and we will make progress so much quicker that way. And so I would request that it would, if I can share, different aspects when we have a grant, when we have our grant cycle open, we can share that information with you all so you're aware too, and can share it with your network too. That's always appreciated. There you go. That would be wonderful, on top of what Jeff was saying. Yes, appreciate your partnership.
Great, thank you. Katie?
Well, thank you both so much for being here and talking to us today. This has been really, really informative. And just so everyone knows, we are going to have the PowerPoint and contact information available if you have any more questions that we didn't cover today. But thank you both so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you all for the opportunity, and stay safe, everyone.
You
Yes.
too.
Take care. Thank you.